Hello and welcome. I am back to show you a new plugin from Soundtoys. Now, Soundtoys have been away for about 5 years or something silly like that. They've returned with a plugin called superplate. So it is an extended or a full version of what they originally came out with years ago, which was a little plate. So this one is full on. It's a whole load of plates in a plate reverb plugin. Do we need more plate reverbs? Well, it's hard to tell really because there's so many around, but then I've been diving into this plugin and I feel like actually maybe we do, because this one is really very cool. So let's check it out. Okay, so I'm going to start by just giving you a little bit of an overview of the plugin, just so you can kind of see the layout and see a little bit about what everything does. So I'll try and run through it fairly quickly so we can actually get to listening to it as well, because I'm going to show you a couple of examples, something on the vocals and then something on drums as well, so you get a bit of a sound feel for the different flavors and how it can work. Right, so you've got 5 different plates on here. So we've got the classic 140 and the gold foil 240. So that's basically the EMT 140 and the EMT 240. So we know what they sound like. I think we're kind of already well versed in those, so I won't spend too much time in that. But the next ones, this is the third one. We've got the Audicon, which is apparently commonly known as the Plate 2, which is like a punchy steel plate, and it has a little bit more sparkle than the 140. Next up is the E Plate 3 or the Eco Plate 3. This one is apparently styled after 140, but it's that much brighter. It's good for percussive sounds. So we're going to try this one particularly on drums in a bit. Often used by Michael Jackson, Quincy Jones, George Benson and whatnot. And then you've got the last one, which is Stocktronics, based on the Stocktronics RX4000. So this is a Swedish plate. It's a super thin plate as well, and a stainless steel one. So this one can be that much brighter than all the rest. The additional thing you've got here are the preamps that it's running through. So you can have it, it defaults on this one, but you can have it on this one, which is completely clean. So it's basically going through no preamp at all. Okay, so it's not going to affect the sound. It's just the sound of the plate. And then we've got this preamp, which is tube based. So this one's based on the EMT V54 tube preamp. So you're going to get, it's much warmer. It's got a slight overdrive and it can get a little bit distorted if you push it, which is a really nice thing. And last one, we've got this one, which is a solid state. So this is a transistor based on the EMT 162 preamp. Now this one includes a compressor in it as well. So the idea of that was that it was meant to kind of smooth the transients out as it's going into the compressor. So you'll hear that as we go along and how they can be kind of different. And I think one thing to bear in mind when you're doing this, so you can really hear that, is to actually try and drive the input a little bit so you can actually hear what it's doing and see whether you want to use the preamps, which one, or if you don't want to use that at all. Next up, you've got the decay time. So it's just a general overall decay time for each one. You've also got the infinite decay time. So this one, if you use that, it's of course does what it says in the tin. It's going to go on forever and ever, so it can be really good to get some really cool effects there. Pre-delay, really handy to get the reverb out of the way, to clean it up a little bit. So that means that it doesn't start to play the reverb back until the time that you set. So it goes up from 0 to 250 milliseconds. By the way, if you hold control, you can actually see what those milliseconds are. There you go. Okay, that's the same with like all Soundtoys plugins actually. Next up is modulation. So that's going to create like an ever so slight pitch shift on the tails of the reverb. So if you want to make it just a little bit more interesting, it's going to sound less natural when you use too much of that, but that might be what you want. So there it is if you want it. And then you've got 2 filters as well, so you can filter out the highs, filter out the lows. Really good to be cleaning things up if you want to. Like I always use filters rather on reverb, so it's really handy to have it just built into the plugin there. So you've got a low cut and a high cut on there. Now the next part is really fun. So this is when I feel like this is when it starts to get a little bit more interesting. So you've got a parametric EQ, so you can actually EQ the reverb, which is something that I always do anyway, but it's nice to have something built into the plugin. You can turn it on and off there. You've got your filters as we see up here. This is just showing a more visual guide of that. So you can do that there, you can do that here. Okay, so there are your filters, and now we've got 2-band parametric, so if you want to cut or boost those, you can change the Q as well and have a little play with that. So we're going to do that in a second. I'll show you on a vocal so you can hear what it's doing. Now this is the really cool part. It's the auto decay. Now it's essentially a sidechain in the same way that you would send this into a sidechain, so it's ducking the sound of the reverb when whatever you're sending into it is playing. This does a very similar thing. Now the difference with this is instead of ducking the volume of the reverb, it actually reduces the decay time of the reverb. Okay, so you've got a few different controls on here. You've got the threshold, which is choosing when it's going to be kicking in. The target, which is it determines how much of the reduction in the reverb time actually happens, so how much of it actually gets pulled down. And then recovery, this is sets how fast or how slow the decay time returns to its normal setting. And then the last bit we've got here is the stereo width, either 100% or you can kind of make that mono if you really want to, which is really handy. It saves you having to set up a whole other channel to do so, and balance if you want it to just go to one side or the other. Now I think we should actually just have a listen to this so you can hear that in action, because that is the best way to do things. So let's have a listen. Here it goes. Okay, so it's time to have a quick listen to each of the plates. Now I'm just going to cycle through each one. I'm going to play back a vocal line so you can just start to hear the difference between all the different plates and just hear how different the textures are and how the different colors are essentially. At the moment I'm just going to go through without any preamp, so you're hearing them completely clean, and then we'll have a look at those afterwards so you can kind of see really what difference it makes. I think one thing about this plugin is all the other features and functionality that it has. That's what really brings the plugin into play. That's when it starts to get interesting. That's what Soundtoys does really well, is it allows you to really mold and shape the sound. So let's just have a quick listen to them to start off with. Here it comes.
It's so caustic how you thought you had it all. It's so caustic how you thought you had it all. It's so caustic how you thought you had it all. It's so caustic how you thought you had it all. It's so caustic how you thought you had it all.
So as you can see, they all sound quite different. So already you've got quite a few different colors in the palette to play with there. So what we're going to do is we're just going to smash it through with some of these different preamps so you can kind of hear how different they are. I'm just going to stick on one plate for now. So we're going to go with the 240, might as well. This is the solid state. So this is one which also has a little bit of compression in there.
It's so caustic how you thought you had it all, and if word got out that it was not what you wanted.
And let's now try the valve, see how different that is.
It's so caustic how you thought you had it all, and if word got out that it was not what you wanted.
So you can hear the slight overdrive in there, which is definitely different to the transistor one. I actually quite like the transistor one just a little bit better because I like what it's doing with the compression. It's ducking some of those transients just ever so slightly, which is really nice. Now let's move on just a little bit so you can see the rest of the controls, because I think this is, like I said, when it starts to get more interesting. So you've got the filters, so you can really clean things up, and then you've got the EQ as well. So what I'm going to do is we're just going to dive into that a little bit so you can hear that in motion, if you like, and then I'll show you this auto decay part because that's really cool indeed.
It's so caustic how you thought you had it all, and if word got out that it was not what you wanted. It's so caustic how you thought you had it all, and if word got out that it was not.
Yeah, see, already that is just cleaned up that reverb a little bit so I can go just a little bit harder on it, which I really like. So maybe I'm going to bring up the decay time just a smidge as well. And I'm just going to just pull up that pre-delay too, just to make it that little bit cleaner still.
It's so caustic how You thought you had it all, and if word got out that it was not what you wanted.
So that's quite nice. I'm a big fan of pre-delay. However, I actually do prefer using a sidechain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that off, and I'm now going to look at the auto decay. So these are the three things that you've got down here, like I said. So what we're going to do is just nudge down that threshold, and then you're going to start to see where it kicks in. So if you look at this knob just here, you're going to start to see where it kicks in. Let's have a look at that.
It's so caustic how you thought you had it all, and if word got out that it was not what you wanted.
So now you can see that it's actually it's essentially kind of cutting the sound as the vocal comes in, or rather it's as it specifically said in the manual, it's actually shortening the decay time just as that vocal hits. So it just cleans things up really well.
It's so caustic how you thought you had it all.
And then if you have the threshold all the way down here, so it's fully anti-clockwise, it's going to generally just bring that reverb down quite a lot. So you can really get away with having quite an aggressive reverb, but just kind of tucked in there, which is a really nice way to control it.
It's so caustic how you thought you had it all, and if word got out that it was not what you wanted.
Okay, so now let's quick look at this recovery as well before we get to the target. So that is how quickly it essentially snaps back to normal. So if I just leave it on the fastest, it's going to just come back as quickly as possible. If you go to the slowest, as you can imagine, it's going to hang over that much more. So let's have a listen to that.
It's so caustic how you thought you had it all. It's so caustic how you thought you had it all.
And then lastly, with the target, this is determining how much of a reduction of the reverb time it is. So let's just adjust that, and you can hear how that works too.
It's so caustic how you thought you had it all, and if word got out that it was not what you wanted, 'cause you're freezing now without the fire of youth, you run away.
So as you can see, just with these three controls, you've got so many things there that you can just use to really sculpt that reverb. So you don't have to just use the decay time as the only option. As useful as that is, and that's obviously doing a lot, to have these more dynamic controls, I think that's what really makes it interesting. And it saves you also having to load another plugin before or after it, which is what I would usually do. I'd usually set up an actual sidechain, but now you can kind of do it all in here, which is super, super handy. Now let's move on. I'm going to show you very similar thing, but we're going to show you it on drums. If you're really liking this video, then do me a huge favor and hit the old like and subscribe and notification bell, and you'll get notified of upcoming videos. Also, if you want some free stuff, I've always got some free stuff for you. Sign up to the mailing list, and I will send you an EQ cheat sheet as well as some one-shots that you can use in your mixes. Shall we carry on? I think we should. Okay, so here we are now with some drums to listen to. So focus on the snare, because it's the snare that I'm sending through to the reverb. So this is a sound without any reverb, just so you can hear it. And again, as I said, just so focus on the snare. And now we're going to bring in that plate. Now I'm using the E plate 3, so the eco plate, because that's the one which they say is really good for percussive sounds. And I'm just going to show you what I've done. So I'm going to bring in that plate, and then I'm going to start to tweak the auto decay to try and just mold that a little bit, so it allows the reverb to just fit into the mix a little bit more. So let's take all of these off. See, that's starting to sound better, but it's now too long. It's still too long, but I do like the aggressiveness of that reverb. So I want to try and keep some of that decay in there, but I want to try and control it. So this is where the auto decay will come in. So let's have a tweak of that. So that's starting to sound good, but what I want to do is I'm going to bring down a decay just a little bit, and then I'm also going to play around with the auto decay, because that's what's going to really allow it to fit better into the mix. So let's have a little play around. And there we go. So that sounded much cleaner. I gave it a little bit more of a tweak on the EQ as well, just so I could get rid of some of that muddiness that was in there. And now it just sounds much more solid, and it sounds like just like a cool room, really. I know it's a plate, but it's got a little bit more snap than a room, but now it's nicely controlled. So that is the thing that I find is super cool about this plugin. You don't have to insert another couple of plugins to get things going on. All you need to do is start to play around with everything that's already included, and very quickly you start to get a really, really fantastic and just usable reverb. Now, I was just using one plate on this snare, but I could also cycle through and just see if there's a better one that really fits a little bit more. But the main thing is just keep tweaking and more goodness will come. So yeah, well done, Soundtoys. And that's it. So like I said, the one thing that I find really, really cool about Soundtoys plugins is it's always got lots of different knobs and little just other things to play around with to really sculpt the sounds. That is something that they do really, really well. And this is no exception to that rule. I know we've been waiting about 100 years for a new plugin from Soundtoys. Maybe it was around 1968 they came with their last one. No, you're kidding. But it's really nice that they've actually come back with something really proper. It was something that was just totally worth the wait. So good work, Soundtoys. Looking forward to more. Okay, that's it for now. Leave some comments down below if you want to talk a little bit more about it. I'd love to hear your thoughts to see if you think it's something that we need. Do we need more plates? I think we do. Cheers for watching. Bye for now.